Welcome to episode 134 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to share 5 things that I'm embarrassed to tell you. Visit truthforteachers.com to ask a question or to share your thoughts in the comments. This episode is brought to you by Really Good Stuff. If you want to know the top 10 challenges that teachers face in the classroom, check out their national poll. They have the results from more than 700 participants. It's at reallygoodstuff.com/solutions. You'll also find teacher tips, resources, and innovative products that are designed to save you time. And if you order materials through their site, you can use promo code RGSTruth10. And you'll get 10% off your order between now and the end of 2018. So just go to reallygoodstuff.com and you'll see their resources there. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different. This is a format that I've heard podcasters in other niches use before, and it's really interesting for me to listen to as a podcast listener. So I figured it would be really good for me to share this with you all, even though I'm sort of cringing thinking about putting this out into the world and admitting the things that I'm about to admit. But here we go. 5 things I'm embarrassed to tell you. The first thing that I am embarrassed to tell you is that working with kids was not my favorite part of teaching. So a lot of people will say, teaching is all about the kids, connecting with kids, spending time with kids, enjoying your kids. And I know that that's the case for a lot of teachers. But for me, that wasn't the best part. For me, the best part was solving problems and designing learning experiences and creating systems that helped the classroom run smoothly and made sure that all the kids were learning. My favorite part of teaching, and the main thing that drew me to the profession in the beginning, was creating lesson materials, writing curriculum. I love creating stuff for kids to use in the classroom. I spent so many hours as a teacher just very happily all evening long creating center materials and games and stuff like that. And then I would actually feel a little bit disappointed when I was done and it was time to actually implement them. And that's why I'm so happy now in my current role where I basically get to make the resources so that the teachers who would rather just be with the kids don't have to spend their evenings and weekends doing it. They can just be present with the kids and use the stuff that I created. And, I realized this a couple years ago. I realized this when I was still in the classroom because one of my best friends was teaching next door to me. And, I would always make stuff in the evenings and stuff and bring it into her. And she was like, how did you get all these good ideas? How do you know all this stuff to do? I'm like, I don't know. It just pops into my brain. Don't you feel that way too? I feel like you have lots of good ideas. She's like, I don't have good ideas, Angela. She's like, I just take your ideas. But you know what she was really good at? She was really good at being present with her kids. She was super energetic. She would laugh with them, joke with them. She was just really engaged. That's what she loved to do. Coming up with the lesson ideas was just not her forte. She was happy to just have me do it, and then she would take it and run with it. So I realized then that not every teacher thinks about teaching the same way that I do. But the reason why that feels embarrassing, even though I understand this is just a personality type, is it makes me feel like less of a teacher. What kind of teacher says the best part of teaching isn't the kids? The kids are always supposed to be the best part, right? And it just didn't feel like that for me. I just like designing things. And so, yeah, it feels a little bit embarrassing. It feels like people may judge me a little bit for that, but there it is. The second thing that I'm embarrassed to tell you is that when people ask me, do you miss being in the classroom? I know what the right answer is, in the sense that I know what answer they're looking for. I'm supposed to miss the kids. But as I said, my favorite part of the job, which I got to do maybe 20% of the time, usually less than that, is something that I get to do 100% of the time now. Writing, making stuff, being creative, doing big picture analysis of what different problems are and coming up with new innovative solutions. So I have moments where I miss certain aspects of classroom work, but honestly, no, I don't miss being in the classroom anymore. And, I wouldn't say that I would never go back. Nothing is off the table, but it's not something that I am excited to do at this point. Let's put it this way. It would be really difficult for me to thrive in a bureaucratic system at this point in my life. I have never done well with following the rules, especially when the rules don't make sense to me, especially when I know that the rules don't really benefit kids and they don't benefit me. I don't want to follow them. So I am just much happier working outside the system. So that's embarrassing to tell you that I really don't miss being in the classroom, but that's the truth. The third thing that I'm embarrassed to tell you is that I write so much about mindset and motivation and productivity these days because I struggle with that so much myself. It's pretty much a daily basis. These are things that I'm having to attend to and think about and experiment with. That's how I've come to learn so much about these topics, because I've been working through them in my own life. If any of those topics, if having like a focused, productive, healthy, positive mindset, staying motivated, if any of that stuff was easy for me and just came naturally to me, it probably wouldn't be compelling enough for me to keep researching and keep experimenting with. I have so many days when it's just hard for me to get motivated. And, I'm especially distracted by social media. I've told you all that before, many times in the past, about how I have to be really intentional about not checking my phone all the time and that sort of thing. But I'm just continually experimenting with productivity strategies because it's hard to follow through. I can see the most effective way to do things, but actually doing it is just as hard for me as it is for everyone else. So the only way that I feel like I'm unique, I have any sort of unique gifting in this area, is that I can see the solution very clearly. A lot of people get so bogged down in just the day-to-day stuff that they sort of can't see the forest for the trees. I'm really good at figuring out what needs to be done. What's a system? What's a procedure? What's something that could fix this? But actually doing it. If you struggle with actually following through, please know I struggle with following through as well. So that's why I write so much about those topics, because it's something that I need to keep applying to my life over and over and over again. And I'll find things that will work for a while and then they'll stop working because I'll be in a different season of life, or just things change, right? And I get bored really, really, really easily. So I can't just do the same thing all the time. So I'll stick with one procedure, one daily routine, one something for a while, and then I'll have to figure out something else or switch back and forth between 2 and 3 routines that really work well for me. So that's why I'm so passionate about those topics, because it's something that I always, always, always have to be on top of and I have to be mindful of. So since I'm thinking about it all the time, I just share that stuff with you too. The fourth thing is that I am embarrassed about some of my past work, a lot of my past work. In fact, everything that I've written that's more than 2 years old tends to embarrass me. And that has always been true. In 2008, I was embarrassed about the things that I wrote in 2005. I just feel like education and the world in general changes so quickly, and I'm constantly learning and growing. So the things that I believed years ago are not necessarily the same advice that I would give today. And I'll give you an example of that. I wrote a book in 2010 called Awakened: Change Your Mindset to Transform Your Teaching. And it's about how to change the way that you perceive your job so that it feels less stressful. And it walks you through the journey that I took as a teacher when I was learning those lessons about how to focus on my own attitude, my own mindset, the things that I can control, instead of constantly getting discouraged by all the things that I can't control. And all of that is incredibly important. But what I've noticed in recent years, and maybe just become more tuned to, is how the whole love and light and positivity movement can be used sometimes as a tool to silence people who are trying to speak out about oppressive systems and marginalization. And I don't want to contribute to that problem. Some people, not necessarily even in the education space, just in general, have taken the whole positivity thing to an extreme and think that focusing on anything but your own attitude is just like looking outward for blame. And if you try to hold other people accountable or you try to confront an unjust system, it's twisted as to, you see yourself as a victim. You just need to look inward. You just need to focus on improving you. Look within yourself. Take a good look in the mirror instead of finger pointing. But I don't see it as looking outward for blame when we acknowledge systemic and structural issues. That's how we change the world, instead of just changing the way that we personally experience the world. I think we can do both. And the book didn't really talk about that. So I believe in the principles in Awakened. I still use them to this day. They can help you change your mindset. But I feel like I want teachers to know that we also have a responsibility to do more than just change our perception of things. If something's not right in the world, we can't just look within ourselves and focus on improving ourselves and hope that everyone else does that too. A mindset shift is an important piece, but let's also try to fix the problem that is creating the need for the mindset shift. We can work on ourselves and speak truth to power. So when I think back on these kinds of issues, that's another lens that I wish that I had the understanding at that time to talk about. It's something that was missing there. And the thing with a book is like, I can't really take that back. I can re-record a podcast episode, I can edit a blog post, but once something is in print, it's out there. And, that makes it really tricky. So, and I think about like my first book too, The Cornerstone, which is about classroom management. I wrote that back in 2008. I was in the classroom still at the time, and it was just like, pictures and strategies and forms and things that I actually used as a teacher. But, that was, 10 years ago. And I was much more focused on compliance then than I am now. I don't think it's a bad book. I think the stuff that I share in the 40-Hour Teacher Workweek Club is much better. There's a whole classroom management component to that, and that has been updated, and that reflects more of my current thinking and the current trends in education. But that was my whole focus when I first started the blog. It was all classroom management. The first name of the site was Miss Powell's Management Ideas for Teachers. That was before I was married. And it was just all focused on routines and organization and behavior management and that sort of stuff. And now we don't really talk about managing a classroom so much anymore. We don't manage kids. We're leaders. We lead a classroom. We lead children. And just the whole lens has shifted a little bit. So when I look back on some of my old stuff, it's just, I wouldn't say it the same way today as I said it then. Let's put it that way. The final thing that I'm embarrassed to tell you is that I missed the whole equity lens for a really, really long time. I'm going to do a whole podcast episode on my journey toward becoming, I guess, woke is probably the best word, even though that's a terrible word. I don't think anyone can actually be woke. I think it's just sort of like a journey, right? But how I have learned about race and social justice and, how the history of our country impacts the way things are today. I mean, I wasn't born knowing the things that I know now. And when I talk about those kind of things on the podcast, I don't want to make this a 2-hour long episode. So I just kind of get right to the point. Let's just kick the knowledge to you and let it be. But there's a whole backstory there. This has been a lifetime of influences and experiences that have brought me to the understanding that I have currently. And, I would like to credit some people for helping me along this journey and kind of talk to you about how I've arrived in this place, because, maybe you're feeling like you don't know as much as you'd like to know. And maybe you compare yourself to people you feel like know more than you. And I think we've all been there. So I want to share my journey for that purpose. So the part of this that I'm embarrassed about is that I knew things for a long time before I spoke up about them. I had this platform for many years, and I did not use it to speak up about social justice, or specifically racial justice. That didn't change for me until Freddie Gray was killed. And that wasn't until 2015. I saw teachers on social media who were more upset about toilet paper being looted from a CVS in the riots than they were about an actual human life that was lost. And I don't know what it was about that incident, but a switch just flipped for me. I just saw things that I couldn't unsee at that point. And I realized that a lot of the teachers who felt the riots were the problem instead of the reaction to the problem were people in our classrooms teaching Black and brown students every single day. We had just finished Black History Month, and all these white teachers were posting Martin Luther King Jr. quotes, but somehow they had missed where he said, "Riots are the language of the unheard." And I felt complicit in their ignorance by not using my platform to challenge that belief system about the communities that they're teaching in. So that was when I did the first podcast episode where I really sort of went there. I think it was called Race, Poverty, Riots, and Our Students. I'll look up the episode number for you for that. But it was back in 2015. And I just sort of let it all out at that point, and I haven't stopped since then. Something just flipped in me that I realized that I had this opportunity to reach people and I wasn't using it. And I'm embarrassed about that. If you go back and listen to that podcast episode or you read the blog post for it, it's obvious that that wasn't my first time examining those issues. Like, it's clear these were things that I had been thinking about and learning about and researching and sort of, self-reflecting on for a really long time. And yet I kept all that knowledge and experience to myself. I didn't share it with you. I had information that would help you serve your students better, understand the community you teach in, like connect with your kids more, and I didn't want to talk about it. And I don't even really know why I didn't want to talk about it. I mean, part of it is because I knew it would offend some people. I mean, some people are super offended, I'm sure, just listening to me right now. I'm sure that was part of it. Another part of it was just feeling like I still didn't know enough. I wasn't enough of an expert to say anything. I knew then, and I still know now, there's huge gaps in my understanding, and there's just biases that I have. There's just things that I don't know at this point. And I didn't want to talk about things if I didn't feel like I had totally mastered that topic. And it just kept me from ever saying anything. And to the point where I felt like enough is enough. And I have to just do the best with the knowledge that I have right now, because there's just too much at stake. These are our kids' lives. These are our kids' futures. And if I have information that's going to help you, then I got to share it. And I feel like after the election in 2016, I started waking up to more things that have been going on in this country since the very beginning. But I frankly was not paying attention. I was in a little bubble of privilege. So I feel like I sort of have a wider lens every year. When I first started my site, there was no social media back then. That was 2003. But my focus was just on classroom management. That was the thing that I saw. And then I started realizing that there was more to it than that a teacher's belief system and mindset and, thoughts about his or herself and his or her students really impact the way you teach. So I started moving more into mindset. From there, I started moving more into equity issues, and at the same time moving into productivity issues, because, how can we focus on what really matters most? How can we make the most of our time? How can we let go of this pressure to always do more? So I feel like I've kept pulling back further and further and further and having this just fuller perspective. And it can make my earlier work seem naive or sort of incomplete. And I guess because it is. I mean, that's one of the tricky parts about putting yourself out there and sharing your ideas with other people, right? I'm not the same person as I was in 2003 when I first started sharing ideas with other teachers. Our country's not the same. Our schools are not the same. Our understanding of brain research and how children learn are not the same. Everything that I'm sharing with you is just a snapshot of the best information and understanding that I have at the time. I had someone leave a comment on my blog recently that was sort of like outraged that I had reviewed a particular book because the author of that book has received some pushback for being, having sort of like a fluffy narrative and not really talking about some of the more important issues. It's just, to some people, that person's work just feels a little gimmicky, basically. But that blog post that I got this comment on was from 2013. The book had just come out, and I read it, and I liked it. I learned something from it. To me, it was valuable in that moment in time. It helped me, and so I shared it with other people. And I'm not going to take that down. The only things I'm going to take down are the things that I think could actually be harmful for teachers and kids. And I did a big overhaul of my website in 2016. We redesigned everything, and we went through every single article on the site. There were literally thousands of things that I had written over the 13 years prior, and we decided which ones to keep and which ones to get rid of. So there were a few just sort of stupid things that I had written back in the day that I don't stand by anymore. I got rid of them. And actually, I'm going to do a whole podcast episode about that, about things that I used to believe about education and things that I used to say and do that I don't anymore, and how my thinking has changed, why my thinking has changed. But I kept most of the articles on the site because most of the stuff just shows growth, right? I mean, you can go to anyone's website and you can see different types of posts and a different quality of posts years ago than what they're doing now. I mean, hopefully, right? Like, otherwise, are you really learning and growing yourself if you're still the same person? So while I wish that I had a deeper perspective when I was in my 20s than I do now at age 40, it's just not possible. And I accept that of myself. I know that if I wait to tell you about something until I know everything about it and I'm a total expert and like it's like the final finished version of everything there is to know about something, I'm never going to get to tell you about anything, right? So I just try to stay focused on sharing my perspective, what works for me, my experience, the knowledge that I've gained over the years. And I try to bring in other perspectives so that you can learn from people who know things that I don't know. And that's sort of the best that I can do. Because I know it's just me over here and I'm going to make mistakes. I don't know everything. I don't see everything, but I'm going to keep showing up and hopefully we can learn and grow together. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast episode with you. So you could see I'm on the same level playing field as you, where I'm just trying to learn and grow. And I'm just sharing where I'm at in the journey and what I've figured out so far. Your takeaway truth for the week ahead is from Maya Angelou, who said, "When you know better, you do better." And I hope that I can do this kind of episode again in another year or so, and I'll have more things that I'm embarrassed about, because that means that I will have learned to know and do better than I am doing right now. And there's nothing embarrassing about that. Have a great week. You can do this. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. Want more than just a weekly podcast episode from me? I'd love to also send you a weekly message of encouragement via email. I'll reach out each Sunday evening with a short message that's designed to help you feel more prepared and inspired and motivated for the week ahead. It's not a newsletter or a bunch of announcements. This goes out to over 85,000 educators. So I put just as much thought into crafting this weekly written message to my email list as I do into crafting my podcast episodes. And it's entirely unique content that you won't find anywhere else online. Just go to thecornerstoneforteachers.com/subscribe and you can sign up. That's thecornerstoneforteachers.com/subscribe.